There was an old farmer in Arizona who owned the best farm in the area. Everybody said his crops were the best, and people came from all over to buy their goods from him. Whenever people asked him how he was able to grow such good quality crops, the old farmer would say it was all down to his scarecrow. "That old scarecrow is the one I have to thank," said the farmer. "He makes sure no crows or critters or pests come near my crops." The old farmer had built the scarecrow himself, and it was a fearsome sight. He spent months working on it to make it as scary as possible. He knew how important it was to keep pests away from his crops, so he gave it enormous straw arms that stretched out at about 6 feet, and big long legs that made it as tall as a tree. But the scariest thing about this scarecrow was its head. The farmer had carved it himself out of a huge pumpkin. He spent countless days and nights perfecting his design. The scarecrow's face was so grotesque and ugly that even he was sometimes scared to look at it. But it was very effective, scaring away every rodent and bird that ventured near. The neighboring farm was owned by 2 young men who were brothers named Josh and Harold. They were lazy and never did much work around the farm, which resulted in their crops being bad. They were jealous of the old farmer's success and were plotting against him. If they could drive him out of business, they could take over his farm and make more money. So one night, the brothers decided to sneak onto the old farmer's land. They stole his prize scarecrow and brought it back to their own house, where they stuffed it into an old closet so nobody would ever find it. The next day, the farmer woke up to find his hideous scarecrow missing, and all of his crops being eaten by rats and crows. He fell to his knees and cried, knowing that his farm would soon be out of business. Meanwhile, the brothers Josh and Harold were watching from their own property, and couldn't help laughing out loud when they saw the old man's tears of grief. Hearing the laughter, the old farmer came over and asked them if they knew what happened to his scarecrow. The brothers looked him right in the eye and said they had no idea where his precious scarecrow might be. "But you know I'll go out of business, and I have to sell my farm if I can't find my scarecrow," said the farmer. Josh just laughed in his face, saying, "That's just your tough luck, isn't it?" "Sucks to be you," giggled Harold. The old farmer walked slowly back to his house, his head hanging down in defeat and depression. That night, Josh and Harold had trouble sleeping, not because they felt any remorse, but because they couldn't get the image of the scarecrow's horrible, twisted face out of their minds. They decided they would never be able to sleep as long as that ugly pumpkin head was in their house. So they got up and dragged the scarecrow out of the closet. Harold took a baseball bat and smashed the scarecrow's head to pieces, until all that was left was bits of pumpkin strewn around the floor. The brothers swept up the pumpkin head pieces and threw them in the trash. Then they went back to bed and were soon fast asleep, having put all thoughts of the disgusting scarecrow face out of their heads. Sometime after midnight, Josh and Harold were awoken by the sound of scratching and clawing at their bedroom door. "Did you forget to put the dog out?" asked Harold sleepily. We don't have a dog," stammered Josh. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open, and a solitary, long, straw arm snaked in through the opening. Then a second arm thrashed around, followed by 2 long stick legs. The two brothers were frozen in fear and could only look with horror as the headless scarecrow's body rose up on its long stick legs, and its long arms reached out for them in the darkness. Harold felt a cold, sinewy, straw claw close around his ankle and screamed as loud as he could. He begged his brother Josh to help him, but Josh was already running out of the bedroom. Fleeing in terror, he ran down the hallway, crashed through the front door, and out onto the moonlit road. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, puffing and panting and screaming at the top of his voice. As he passed his neighbor's house, he saw the old farmer standing at his gate. In the moonlight, he could see the farmer just staring at him with a strange sort of smile on his face. Josh kept running, his bare feet slapping against the rough gravel road. He glanced back over his shoulder and saw something that scared him to his very soul. He saw the scarecrow running along the road close behind him. It was gaining on him, coming closer and closer. And that wasn't all he saw. He noticed that the scarecrow had a brand new head, and it looked a lot like Harold.
We all have that one story, don't we? The one you grow up thinking about but never actually grows the balls to tell anyone. Well, this is my story. I don't know what I'm hoping to accomplish by telling you. Maybe I'm looking for someone to tell me that I'm not insane, or maybe once I put it on paper it will... hell, I don't know. Just someone read this. Just please. Let me give you a little background. 20 years ago, when I was 8 years old, living with my mom, my friend Dave and I decided that we would brave the house. Now, the house was an abandoned 2-story home that had been empty going on 10 years, save for the occasional drug abuser that would sleep in it. However, that's not what made this particular house special. The standing rumor is what made it interesting. For as long as I can remember, adults in my neighborhood had told us, the children, that it was haunted. I'm sure it was just their way of getting us not to play in it though. Regardless, because of that, the house had a sort of ominous aura that hung around it. Just looking at that decaying building would give you the shivers. Although, despite our inherited fear of the place, Dave and I decided that we would explore this house. We would become legends in our own right. At least that's what we hoped. It was a Tuesday, and all those years ago, well past midnight, and both of our parents had fallen asleep. The two of us decided we would sneak out. Use the night as our cover. We agreed it would be the best to meet in front of the house. Still, I wish we hadn't agreed to do it. There I was, alone, waiting in front of the house for my friend. I couldn't help but feel small when I looked at it. It might have been old and the wood may have been rotting, but man did it look enormous. I bet even adults felt dwarfed by it. To keep myself from chickening out, I decided to think about something else while I waited. It was a little cold that night, which was the typical weather after a hard rain. Ah, crap, I muttered, noticing the mud that covered my shoes. I should have paid more attention to where I was stepping. Mom is going to kill me when she... My voice trailed off and I heard a dull thud from behind me. Sounded like someone knocked the door. Was it the house? Or was I just imagining things? I spun around expecting to see a hairy monster behind me. Instead, it was just a house. Broken windows, splintered wood, and roof that had more than a few holes in it. Just the usual nothing to panic about. I should have been relieved, but I found myself slightly shaken. Soon I would be stepping into one of the most feared places in our neighborhood. I wasn't even inside yet, and I could already feel a tremor in my hands. Before I could reconsider the mission, Dave arrived. I quickly stuffed my hands into my pockets to hide the quiver. I could see his small figure bouncing up and down. The little joker was skipping across the street. My fears were immediately replaced with giddy laughter. "You're such a clown," I managed to say in between my giggles. We both reached out and shook hands like his father had taught us. Luckily, he didn't notice a tremor. Dave used his hand to smooth back his black hair, kind of like a greaser would in a cliche movie. "You ready for this?" He nodded towards the door. Typical Dave, he always tried to look cool, whether it would be riding his bike with no hands or sneaking into an abandoned house. He never fails to give off "I am a badass" vibe. I tried my best to sound nonchalant. "Only if you are, Davy." The command awarded me a slight snicker. Dave hated it when I called him Davy. He said it sounded girly, and that's exactly why I used it. Rather than shout a retort at me, he simply nudged me towards the house and we began walking to the door. Our small feet made quiet echoes in the street. I was worried we might wake someone. If we had any doubts about what we were doing, that would have been the right time to bail out. Of course, as per the norm, stupidity got the better of us. The second our feet hit the old steps, we knew there would be no turning back. "Think we should knock?" Dave joked. Seeing him act all cool somehow gave me courage, so I knocked. What I heard made the hair on my neck stand at attention. The same thud I heard from earlier reverberated through the door when my knuckles landed. I gulped loudly but maintained an overall calm composure. The two of us breathed deeply and turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. We received a long, drawn-out creak as payment. I thought I was going to pee my pants, and Davy looked like he was about to shit a brick. Somehow, we managed to keep our undies clean. It was dark. Real dark. Neither one of us had brought a flashlight. We didn't want to accidentally wake neighbors by shining a light in their house. Given the circumstances, we decided it would be best to use the moonlight. Our eyes were met with a dimly lit house. It took a minute to adjust to. The house was littered with trash, covered with graffiti, and was seemingly falling apart all over, and yet it didn't seem as frightening as we were led to believe. Sure, the darkness made it look spooky, but as I looked at the cracked marble floor, I couldn't help but be reminded of my house. This isn't so bad. It was me who broke the silence. Do you think the ghost will be pissed that we dragged mud in the house? Dave laughed and pointed at the floor. Little footprints followed us all over the house. Remind me to clean my shoes before I go back home, I giggled at the tough. Here, we are in the big spooky house, cracking jokes about muddy shoes. It was all fun and games after familiarizing ourselves with the first floor, which consisted of an empty living room, a kitchen with a rotted food in the cupboards, a bathroom with a disgusting toilet, and a curious-looking locked door. We decided to explore the second floor. We ascended the stairs together, Dave leading with his brave face on. The wooden stairs were old, much like the rest of the house, and each step left us wondering if it would collapse beneath us. "Think the ghost is up there?" I asked, half sincere. Dave chuckled at the question. "Ghosts probably aren't even real." We had reached the end of the stairs and were on the top floor. It wasn't a big second story. 2 hallways, one to the right and one to the left. 4 rooms for the 2 of us to explore. "Let's go left," Dave suggested. So we went left and into the first room on the right. The door was already open, so we just peeked our heads in. The first thing I noticed was the hole in the roof. Moonlight was shining through it, and it gave us a faint light to survey the room with. Probably big enough to have a bed, dresser, maybe a desk could fit in it too. We couldn't see inside of the closet, though. The light didn't quite reach it. Dave looked at me and I looked at him. "I bet there's something cool in there. Let's go look," Dave suggested with a mischievous smile. Not sure what we were hoping for exactly, a treasure in a closet or something. Just before I stepped into the room, I heard the familiar thud noise. The one that was made before and when I knocked on the door. My heart felt like it was going to stop. The noise was distant, but there was no mistaking it. My first instinct was to run, but I couldn't leave Dave behind. He of course paid no mind to it. Hell, he was already in the room walking towards the closet, and it was at that moment that things went to hell. I never even had a chance to warn him. The second Dave stepped foot in the center of the room, there was a frightening crack. He didn't have time to react. The wood splintered, the ground beneath him gave way, and he fell through the floor. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Everything in front of me was crashing down. The wood was so old and decayed that it couldn't even support Davy. Dust and dirt flew everywhere. By the time it was over, it was hard to breathe. Wait. Dave didn't make a sound. Did he die on impact? Was he okay? My mind had never accelerated so fast. "Dave!" I shouted in between coughs. "Dave, are you okay?" I repeated the question a few more times and waited. After an agonizing minute, I got my reply. "I'm okay," he answered weakly. "Not a scratch on me." I peered down the large hole that was in front of me. Dust was everywhere, but as it cleared, I could see him more clearly. There was Dave, and he was completely intact. And guess where I am? I sighed deeply, glad that he hadn't lost his senses of adventure. "I'm in the locked room. Get down here. I'll open the room for you." He wiped the dirt off his forehead and motioned for me to come down. I obediently turned around and headed for the stairs, preferring to take the safe route. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I noticed something. Were those big footprints always there? The frighteningly large footprints had left on the floor. There was something odd about them, though. They didn't look human. Too big. 4 toes and they were round. My imagination quickly got the better of me, and I could feel the panic rising quickly. I was starting to feel nauseous. Even more when I realized the footprints were leading to the room that Dave was in. I glanced at the front door. It was open. I could leave right now, run home, and tell my parents to call the police. We didn't have cell phones back then, but I didn't do any of that. I just kept walking towards the locked door. The door was open and I could see shadows dancing on the doorframe. There were 2 shadows, one big, one small. The larger shadow was pounding into the smaller one. I could hear the blows landing. Each time it hit, Dave would whimper. I was frozen in place. The door was only a few feet away, but I couldn't bring myself to take another step. I wanted to save my friend, but I just couldn't move. I could only stand there and watch the shadows. Please, stop. The last hit was harder than any of the other ones. I could hear the bones breaking from where I was standing. Dave's shadow stopped moving. The larger shadow picked up the frail little body and began slashing into it with what looked like a blade. A dark liquid splashed onto the floor and started oozing towards the floor. I wanted to puke. I could feel the hot liquid running down my pants. Must have been scared enough to piss myself. I looked at the floor and saw the puddle that I had made. It was time to leave. I took one last glance at the door and what I saw when I looked up still haunts me today. A large humanoid figure stood in the doorway was holding Dave's body. It was too dark to see it clearly, but I got a peek at its eyes. Its big blue eyes. Big and blue like the ocean, and the waves were rippling with rage. I wanted to leave. No, I needed to leave, but my leg refused to move. They were anchored to the floor. The fear had stopped them completely. My heart, on the other hand, was moving. It was moving very fast. Reluctantly, I stood there, staring at the monster that was holding my friend's dead body. It didn't take long for our eyes to meet. We stood there in an eternal staring contest. I was too afraid to blink. I remember thinking that if I closed my eyes, I would never open them again. It was only after 2 long minutes that I could finally feel my legs again, so I slowly took a step back. The monster mimicked my movements by stepping forward each time I took a step back. My heart sunk when I realized what it was doing. Every molecule in my body told me to turn around and sprint, but could I really outrun this monstrosity? No, there was no way. I decided to keep my pace, buy myself time until I got to the door. Once we reached the living room, it dropped. Dave outstretched its arm towards me and grinned. It was the single most vivid thing I had ever experienced in my life. The monster's grin from corner to corner reached both of his eyes. His teeth were long, white, like a shark. We were almost at the door, but he was no longer mimicking my steps. For each step I took, he took 2. Step by step, he was closing the gap. The moonlight from the window shined on his outstretched arms. Its hands were human-like, only there was something off about it. The nails were long, the skin was rotted, and some of the flesh looked like it had been scratched off. It was enough to make me dizzy. Soon I could hear his breathing. Each breath was labored, it was almost wheezing. One more step and I would see its entire body in the moonlight. I didn't want that. The thought alone was enough to make me turn, grab the doorknob, throw it open, and rush out of the house. I didn't dare to look over my shoulder until there was some distance between the two of us. I expected to turn around and see the monster lumbering after me. but surprisingly it wasn't. The monster never came out of the house. It didn't chase me down the street. It didn't rip me to pieces. It just stood there on the porch, waving goodbye. His small front head slowly rocking back and forth, with the same deranged smile on his face. A few days later, when the police report was made public, my parents told me that the monster was just a hobo on drugs. The police had found Dave's body next to a dead homeless man. Apparently, he had overdosed shortly after I had left. I tried to tell myself that I was just imagining things and there was no monster, but I don't know what to believe. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I can't get that fucking smile out of my head. I'm done with this. If I write any more, I'll start having nightmares again. Food's here anyway. I just heard a knock on the door.
I have to tell you something. Sorry, I need to tell you something. A secret. About a place near where I live. Just round the corner, actually. It has taken me 2 years to finally tell you this. You do not have to believe me. I understand that it may sound crazy. All I know is that I will never go there again. Not at night, anyway. For I have experienced what lies within those endless trees. I was 14. I had heard rumours about the woods, and my mother had told me never to go in there, not even in the daylight. She told me it was dangerous. I used to always defy my mother, so I went in there with a couple of friends one night. The walk there was fine. I was eager to go to these so-called dangerous woods. When we reached our destination, my heart already began to thump against my chest. The woods looked terrifying at night. I stood horrified amongst my friends. I no longer wanted to go inside. The trees towered over us, its branches like open arms, welcoming us into darkness. It was too dark to see what lied within them. Not even the moon could light up the shadows. I had an uneasy feeling about the woods, and I begged my friends that we should go home. As you might guess, it pissed them off. I had dragged them out there, and now I was backing out. It's not like me to back out of things, but I did not want to go into those woods. We argued amongst ourselves. My friends were all against me, and thus the decision was decided that we go into the woods. And so, we went in. The next morning, news broke out that a group of 14-year-old boys had been butchered to death in the woods. I felt nothing for them. I told them I did not want to go into those woods. I told them I had an uneasy feeling about that place. I was scared. I remember it so clearly. The 4 of them had decided to tell ghost stories, just to add to my fear. One told of a man who lived in the woods, a lover for children's flesh. He would take them from behind when they were wandering through the woods, alone, and would... That's when my friends decided to run off. I chased after them, trying to follow their laughter. It wasn't long before my ears had guided me into another direction, and silence surrounded me. I was scared, so much that I began to cry. Not something that a 14-year-old boy should be doing, but I was fucking scared. My eyes couldn't adjust to the light, and I was left standing in what seemed like endless black fog. This is how I pictured hell. I couldn't stop thinking about that story. I had horrible thoughts of how it ended. I was convinced it was real. Terrified, I started a slow jog through the woods. I know it sounds stupid, but sprinting just makes it feel more scary. I picked up a rather large branch that had obviously snapped off one of the trees. Not much of a weapon, but it would have to suffice. Then I tried to find my way out. It seemed like I had been running for ages. Maybe I had been running in circles. I tried turning around and running in a different direction. After maybe a few hours of running, I saw a light through the trees. A street light. I gave a sigh of relief and sprinted towards the light when something grabbed hold of my shoulder. My heart stopped. I stopped breathing. My eyes were glued to the light. So close. I let out a tear. It laughed. Then 3 other laughs followed. It was my friends. They continued to laugh and started to jeer. Out of pure anger, fear, and humiliation, I crept onto the broken tree branch and beat all 4 of them to death. I could not see their blood, but I could smell it. I smiled. You don't have to believe me. I understand it may sound crazy. Or maybe I'm crazy.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.